Good morning. My name is Michelle Parlevliet. I'm the moderator of this panel on scenarios on the future of Cyprus. I am very pleased to be here and to be joined by so many such distinguished speakers and to see you all in the audience. We will be having this conversation on possible futures of Cyprus, and the aim is to really invite and encourage reflection and dialogue across diverse perspectives, and in so doing also shift our attention from the pain and the flaws of the past and the stuckness of the present to what is possible in the future. Because the future can be many different things, and the future doesn't evolve in one linear line from now to further. The frame of reference for this conversation is a set of scenarios that have become known as Cyprus Futures, that were launched last year and that became public and were developed by a very diverse group of 36 Cypriots, some of whom are in the audience today, and I'll ask them to raise their hands. And I'm joined in this conversation, as I said, by 6 distinguished speakers. So let me just briefly introduce them, and then briefly tell you also about the format of the conversation in the session, and then let's dive in. So to my most right is Professor Dr. Canan Zeki, who is a professor of curriculum instruction, and her field hence is education. I'll keep the introductions relatively limited because there's lots of information on them on the website. Then, to my right further, is Dr. Christos Clerides, a senior lawyer, head of law at a university, and of course also a long-standing practicing barrister at law. Then we have another lawyer, barrister at law, Mrs. Meral Birinci-Sonan, and I'm very pleased to be with you as well, and a co-founder of the Bicommunal Women's Coalition. Then, to my right, I'm very pleased to have Andromachi Sophocleous with us, a political analyst, politician and activist with a long-standing history in many activities and a podcaster as well since 2020. Then, further to my left, we have Dr. Huri Yontucu, who is a professor at a university focusing on media and communication. You can already hear the diversity of perspectives and disciplines and backgrounds that they bring to this conversation. And then most to my right, Mrs. Xenia Constantinou, thank you very much. A long-standing politician, deputy spokesperson for a party, but also with a long and distinguished career in academia. And we're most pleased to have you with us today. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you all in the audience for joining. And if your phone isn't, yes, let's give them a hand. Thank you very much. And in the audience, I'm very pleased to see several distinguished speakers, not least the Cypriots, many of the Cypriots who were involved in this process. Could I ask you to briefly raise your hand? So in total there are 36, but obviously some of them can't be here because they are traveling or working jobs or taking their children to hospital, whatever. Okay. In terms of the format, I'll briefly, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the process, I'll briefly explain to you something about the Cyprus Future scenarios. And then we have asked the speakers to take 5 minutes to reflect on the plausibility of these scenarios. They came out last year in mid-2023, and of course things have happened since then. So how do they reflect on the plausibility of these 4 possible futures, given the realities of Cyprus today, and what challenges and opportunities do they see in Cyprus' future, and what choices does that represent? Following their inputs, we'll have a conversation which will conclude by hearing from each of them what their vision is for the Cyprus of 2035, which is the time frame that was used for the Cyprus Future scenarios. And then, if time allows, we'll have interaction with you, but I'm not sure we'll get there given the interesting contributions I'm expecting, and a wrap-up. And of course, speakers hopefully will be available to engage with you afterwards. Now, some of you may be familiar with scenarios, and some of you may not be familiar. The process that was used, and now the process that was used to develop these Cyprus future stories are scenarios. And what are scenarios? They are not predictions. In other words, they are not telling you what will happen, nor are they proposals or recommendations. So they also don't take a stance on what should happen. What scenarios are stories of what could happen. They're, in other words, stories describe multiple pathways into the future and that help us to think and talk about our current reality. So they are a tool for strategic thinking and for working with an unpredictable and uncertain and highly dynamic future. And of course, developments in and around Cyprus of the past 1.5 years have highlighted that uncertainty and that dynamism. And the stories need to be relevant to Cypriots of today. So the story started with questions that Cypriots involved in the process were asking. What are the prospects for our children? What will be the safety of our island? How prosperous will our business environment be? How will we deal with climate change? What is going to be the effect of migration in and out of the country? How may health conditions on the island evolve, especially given the experiences of the pandemic? Scenarios also need to be challenging in order to be useful as a tool for thinking, and they need to be plausible. So one needs to be able to tell a convincing story that people imagine that this could happen. And of course, different people from different perspectives may assess that plausibility different, which is what makes the conversation so useful and so enriching. And finally, they need to be clear. So the scenarios were developed by a group of 36, 18 Turkish Cypriots, 18 Greek Cypriots. Religious minorities were included, gender balanced, 18 and 18 men and women, ages ranging from 20 to 65, I believe, and very diverse backgrounds. So a primary school teacher, a priest, a mayor, a former mayor from a village in the north now living in the south, people working with international institutions, somebody who's been involved with previous negotiations, but also people who haven't dealt with any political matters or activism at all, a former investment banker, an estate agent, a winemaker. In other words, entrepreneurs who travel and trade across the island. People with links to political parties, lawyers. In other words, truly a cross-section of society and of people bringing different experiences and perspectives from across Turkish Cypriot, Turkish Cypriot, Greek Cypriot communities, religious minorities. So, what are these stories? You will find a little leaflet on your chair, and I invite you to read that afterwards. I'll just give a very brief introduction now. The first scenario is the scenario called No Way. It's a scenario of stagnation and inaction. And this is a scenario in which the world is one of continued failures in the peace process. And as the cycle of new talks and new failures and conflicting visions continues, the divisions between the two main communities in Cyprus steadily deepen and solidify, which means that the north gradually becomes more and more dependent on Turkey and gets economically integrated with Turkey, increased with increasing security concerns in the south and overall militarization in the island. So a scenario of stagnation and inaction in which the Cyprus problem gradually deteriorates and the division is solidified by 2035. The My Way scenario is a scenario of divergence and opposition in which the Cyprus problem escalates rapidly. The United Nations in this world of My Way, after consultations with the leaderships of both sides, concludes that there is no common ground and no willingness to engage with one another, and decides to suspend his mission of good offices to the island. Meanwhile, the Turkish Cypriot leadership continues its policy of pursuing international recognition and eventually achieves recognition by some states, prompting strong resistance from Greek Cypriots, who leverage their memberships of the EU and the United Nations and invites condemnation of international organizations. So in this scenario of divergence and opposition, the Cyprus problem escalates rapidly and is also associated with increased regional tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean, with fierce competition over the extraction of hydrocarbons. The third scenario is the scenario of peace under pressure. And in this future world, pressured by external forces and their business community, the leadership of both sides start engaging again once more in negotiations, with a lot of help and a lot of pressure from the international community and a lot of input from international communities. And a federation is established, even though there are voices from civil society expressing concern that communities are not prepared for the future and that there's too little attention given to public participation. The dispensation that results through this peace process is one that reinforces mistrust and pays very little attention to developing strong and effective and resilient federal institutions. And the moment pressures and challenges arise in the form of economic integration, the Federation has a very hard time dealing with such stress. So in this scenario of peace under pressure, the Cyprus problem gets settled on the surface. And then finally, in the RWA scenario, communities across the island, people across the island, start increasingly realizing, faced with multiple challenges related to pollution, environmental concerns, business developments, that they actually have a role to play in their future. And through a multi-track approach to peace, communities establish, and with involvement, of course, of negotiations of the political leadership, acknowledge the interdependence in the evolving context and the economic and social benefits of peace, and become partners in a federation that's resilient and inclusive. And in this scenario, by 2035, the Cyprus problem gets transformed. Now, this set of stories is not definitive, it's not exhaustive, but there are ways in which we can reflect on our realities today and realities and futures that we are creating. So may I invite you to speak to that. Meral, can I ask you to join first? What signs are you seeing in current reality that speak to the plausibility of these scenarios?
Well, it's as if, especially the no way, my way, and their way scenario is what we have been experiencing every now and then, but they were never conclusive, because island is divided, and until we resolve the division, none of the scenarios will see their end. The only thing that has not been tried is our way. And I think the main difficulty in that is both education and with education I mean the public propaganda, and then mass media. With that I mean public and private propaganda, which repeat the national rhetoric. So depending on which side of the divide you are born, you are always finding on your desk the scenarios of no way, my way, their way. Somehow the trusted teachers talk about it, your friends talk about it, your friends' parents talk about it, your parents talk about it. Nobody, or let's not say nobody, but only a minority of people mention our way, and they say that Alice in Wonderland will never happen, it's a dream. So they cannot actually visualize our way, where this division is resolved and Cyprus can benefit from this socially and economically. So I think it's a very, very difficult job because we have the restraint of the governments on the both sides, whether you call them the pseudo-government or the real government, whether you use the term occupation or right to self-administration. As we all know, in today's world, it really depends whose side you are on, because we are not talking with the dictionary explanations of these words. And now in the Middle East, we cannot say there is occupation, but we can say there is occupation in Ukraine, right? So it's difficult to use the words and try to expect people to understand what you mean just by stating the words. So we have to go beyond that. We have to go beyond the words, and we have to explain what we really mean. So this is the kind of conversation that is missing, and the public at large, because okay, everybody goes through the education desk and you don't hear the other side story. Everybody somehow is subjected to the media and you rarely hear the other side story. So it's very difficult to hear the conversation, to hear the good conversation. That's why we as the citizens, we have to take part, and we have to talk about it. It should be on our breakfast table, it should be on our lunch table, it should be on our dinner table, it should be as we are driving the car, enjoying with our friends. We should talk about it. We should talk about it all the time. We should talk to our kids about it. We have a 10-year-old son who studies in the Cyprus Republic. He is in year 6 now. He was very resentful this year. He wanted to go to North. It was on and on, on and on, on and on. He wants to stop. He wants to stop this education. Why? Because he is sick and tired of EOKA propaganda. So we listened to him, and it was getting more difficult. The school only just started a month ago, and I told him, we hear you, and you are right, it's sickening, the propaganda. In your naive world, you think that if you go to North, there will be no propaganda. However, there will be propaganda, maybe more propaganda, right? So there, and it will be more difficult for you to understand that it is propaganda because your main language is Turkish, you are a Turkish Cypriot kid. So when they do it to you from your side, you will just inherit it. You will learn it as you are learning it, your mother tongue. So son, you are lucky. You can get sick about the propaganda because this is exactly what the propaganda should do to you. You should feel sick about the propaganda. So you are lucky you are on the other side of the divide. The propaganda makes you sick. You have to speak about it in the school as well. We will do it as parents, whatever it needs to be done to protect you from this propaganda as much as we can. But there is only so much we can do because we don't have the control of the education system. We can only talk about it. So you are lucky. The propaganda didn't win. You win. If you go to the other side of the divide, you may not be that lucky because you will inherit it. How many kids are studying across the divide? It's very, very, we are a group of minority. There is not one Greek Cypriot kid studying in the Turkish Cypriot community. There is, I don't know any Greek Cypriot worker working in the Turkish Cypriot community. So because Turkish Cypriots are isolated, because Turkish Cypriots are the one that will lose in any scenario except for the our way scenario, Turkish Cypriots are looking for there is no collateral, there is no community perception, there is no united idea as to how we save our lives. So we are going into individual cases in order to have better future for our kids. So it is very important that the two communities have the willingness to get to know each other and start talking about our way.
Thank you very much, Meral. Christos, can I ask you what signs are you seeing or indicators in the current reality of Cyprus that speak to these scenarios? In what ways are they more or less plausible in your view?
I think the scenario of resilient peace is like a Netflix scientific movie. Mm-hmm. I don't see it at all happening. Noting the realities. just for the sake of history, I was reading this morning a very interesting article by Nihat Erim, ex-prime minister of Turkey in the 70s and an advisor to the government of Menderes in the 50s, mid-50s. And his dream was, and I still think that this is the policy of Turkey, Taksim, the division of Cyprus, and double union, the Greek part uniting with Greece and the Turkish part with Turkey. That was Nihat Erim in the 50s. Now this scenario has changed by Turkey and is Taksim, but not double union. Is two states by loose confederation, so that loose confederation, the umbrella, can be used in order to control the two states, in particular the Greek Cypriot. So we are nowhere near any solution. So the final scenario, as I say, is not realistic as things are today. Now, as far as the rest of the three other scenarios, the stagnation, inaction, divergence of position, and a solution being imposed on the Cypriots, the third scenario, a solution to be imposed on the Cypriots, was tried with the Annan plan, and it failed. It failed because the referendum of Greeks came up with a resounding 76% against the plan. So if we go again on this scenario, and this is my concern, that we have not learned from our history, we will end up probably with the same scenario. Because I'm not sure, or rather I'm sure, but let's say for the sake of argument that I can say that I'm not sure, whether the Greeks have accepted the notion of rotating presidency, that they have accepted that no decision will be taken at the federal level without the Turkish positive vote, that they can accept that the occupants of Greek Cypriot properties in the occupied part of Cyprus will have the first word as to what will happen to the property as against the registered owner, the legalization of settlers, a normalization of their status in Cyprus, a court that would be composed basically of foreign judges to take decisions in cases of dispute between Greek and Turks. Now, these things I don't think have been accepted or will be accepted by the Greeks. So, in case a scenario of peace under pressure is tried again, I have no doubt that it will be rejected. I say this for the politicians to hear it. The other two scenarios, they have been tried, and we are still ongoing with these two scenarios. Sometimes the stagnation, sometimes going our way. So what is currently in fashion is the first two scenarios. Now, I think that this kind of talks between us, Greek and Turkish Cypriot, and I'm glad I have met today a colleague who is, we have a mutual client. She told me, Dr. Ahmed Javid. Dr. Ahmed Javid, for those of you who don't know, is a pediatrician. He's my age, almost 70. And I took his case with Professor Malcolm Shaw, QC, to the European Court of Human Rights when Tektash did not allow him to travel to Nicosia in order to attend a medical conference. He had to go to Istanbul, Athens, and Larnaca to attend the conference. We took it to the European Court, and the court decided that there is a violation of the freedom of association. Turkey has not ratified the right to free movement, the protocol, and the court decided in favor going roundabout. But the decision led to the checkpoints, that decision. Now, I think that between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, the majority, we can have discussions and find ways and means to communicate. I am positive about that. Although I don't accept the yoga propaganda, like perhaps you will not accept the TMT
I will accept.
propaganda.
I will accept.
Yes, every side has its own history version. But recently I took the case to the High Court of yoga fighters who were tortured by the British administration at the time. And for the first time it was settled, the British government paid compensation. And for the first time the Secretary of State made a statement in the House of Commons saying that we recognize that the yoga were guerrilla fighters. Up to a few years back they were terrorist organizations, but for the first time the United Kingdom, I'm closing. So I close with this. These talks are very useful, and I think that they can contribute. But it's the governments and basically the Turkish government that has to change its mind and policy and culture. If this is not done, I do not think that we have a solution to the Cyprus problem.
Thank you very much, Christos. And an unexpected discovery to find that you have a common client or a client in common.
Especially in this place where I have described earlier, back in the 90s, mid-90s, the European Court sat here where I'm sitting. Nicholas Pratsa, the president of the court, sat, and we tried a case of complaints of Turkish Cypriots against Cyprus at the aftermath of Theophilus Georgiadis case, and the court attended Lydra Palace, sat here, and we heard evidence, examination and cross-examination, in this very room.
Thank you. So the history is with us today, and the interdependence and the connections, the web of connections,
Yes.
is here visible today as well, even if we may not necessarily realize it. Let me then turn to my other side. And Huri, can I ask you, and perhaps also useful to mention that we're going from someone close to his 70s to somebody in her early or mid-30s.
Thank you.
Huri, how do you see the plausibility of these scenarios, and what challenges and opportunities do you see as a young Turkish Cypriot?
I will discuss challenges and opportunities later, but now I'm trying to contribute to these scenarios from a peace activist perspective. Okay, I'm an academic, but my specialized area is media. Therefore, while I'm reading it, I look at this scenario from a peace activist perspective and an ordinary citizen living in Cyprus since, anyway, I'm not going to tell you how long it is, because you're going to understand my age. Yes. When I look at these scenarios, I don't see 4 different scenarios, actually. According to me, these scenarios are divided into 2. What does this mean? The first 3 scenarios, which are no way, my way, and their way, are the scenarios which reinforce and support the status quo in Cyprus. And only the one, our way scenario, reinforce and contribute to the peace-building processes in Cyprus. So what I mean by saying this, divided into 2, and even these 3 scenarios, first 3 scenarios actually divided into 2. For example, no way and my way scenarios, actually the scenarios that we are experiencing it now since 1974. What does this mean? As you all follow from the news, that there is an increase in the level of dependence on Turkey in the north, and we are about to lose our hope because of failed negotiations since 1970s, and we have so many problems in our daily lives. For example, mixed marriage problem. I am one of them, actually. I want to mention this as well. I don't accept having any nationality such as mixed marriage. But when I go to Turkey, I'm not a Turkish. When I go to South, I'm not a Cypriot. And when I'm living in the North, some people don't identify me as Turkish Cypriot. So actually, I don't know who I am when I look at from this perspective. And some people suddenly come up with a new idea, which is a mixed marriage. Actually, if you ask me, I identify myself as a Turkish first human being living on the world first, and then maybe if they force me, I say that yes, I'm Turkish-speaking Cypriot. To identify that I am living in Cyprus since I was born, and I really feel that I belong to this country, and I contribute this country as an academic, as a peace activist, since I started studying and understanding the perspectives of both of the sides. Therefore, these three scenarios actually contribute to this status quo. And the third one, their way, actually, I think, okay, there are political analysts and lawyers here, they know better than me, but we experienced it as far as I know, I read from the books and I heard from my elderlies, we had experienced it in 1960, and we have another example which we are following in Northern Ireland. Okay, they have a peace agreement there, Good Friday agreement, but they are having so many daily problems from economic to health because of they got the peace under pressure. I was in Ireland last year to conduct my postdoc research. I got my scholarship from EU program, and because it was EU program, I went to Ireland, and I studied Northern Ireland from Ireland. Okay, it can be a little bit complicated when you hear it for the first time, but I couldn't travel to the Northern Ireland. Why? Because I took my visa, which was single entry. If I applied to the Northern Ireland visa, 100% they would refuse me because they will see on my passport that it is single entry visa. So without going to Northern Ireland, I tried to study Northern Ireland from Ireland. Anyway, I gave a good perspective when I discussed with Irish people while I was there. It was good and it contributed a lot to me, but I created a very good network through internet. Thanks God that we have an internet now, and we can contact people from there. And I remember that I met with a senior correspondent working at Belfast Telegraph, Gail Walker, and we were discussing about Northern Ireland's Good Friday agreements and the Cyprus conflict as well. And I said to her that at least you have a peace in Northern Ireland. You have a Good Friday agreement. And it really affected me after what he asked to me, that he said to me that, do you think that, does it really work? And I was like, okay, this is not a good idea then. So while I was reading their way scenario, I understood that the peace couldn't be, I don't want to show myself as hopeless, but couldn't be maybe, we can't make it under pressure, unfortunately. Okay, I'm gonna finish. And I hope that we will have a solution in Cyprus one day, which is our way. And I believe that, and I hope that the Cypriots also will understand that the only way to survive is a solution in Cyprus. Thank you so much. I will carry on later.
Thank you very much, Huri. Xenia, can I invite you? Ooh, go ahead.
Thank you to the organizers, thank you to our facilitator. It is certainly a fascinating discussion, much different than the ones that we usually do every day at the TV panels, I must admit. Well, as as a political actor, I found the work that you did quite interesting. I think it manages to get us out of the current status of discussions taking place around the Cyprus issue. I believe that the four scenarios are not equally possible, actually. I believe that especially the first one, the no-way scenario, where there is this stagnation and nothing moves, I think that this is not possible. I think that this is not feasible. Last week I was at a book presentation, and one Greek Cypriot academic, I remember that he commented and he said that last night we saw those missiles going from Iran to Israel, and all the people living in Limassol and in Famagusta areas, they were so worried and they were so anxious seeing these missiles on the sky of Cyprus. And I am wondering, how can they be so worried? And at the same time, we live at an area where just a few meters, maybe kilometers from our houses, there are like 40,000 troops just sitting there, and people seem to be very okay with that. And indeed, I do not think that in politics things stay constant, that things stay like we know them. This is not the case. The world around us is changing too fast, and everybody can see that in all matters, in all domains of our lives, technologically, military-wise, internationally-wise, energy-wise, and so on. So I think that the scenario of stagnation is just a narrow-minded scenario. And I do understand that many people in Cyprus, maybe they feel that they can be very comfortable with it, but they shouldn't have been. Now, concerning the scenario number 2, in the case that we have this, let's say, near future of more clashes, I see that already happening. I see that this is what we live. I see that in the reports of the UNFICYP, for example, for those who really want to read the reports of the UNFICYP and what is going on in the buffer zone and what is going on concerning the dynamics developed between the two communities. I do see that these clashes are approaching us more and more every day. And maybe this will exercise some pressure to move to the third scenario. But I think that we have already tried that quite a few times. Indeed, it was feasible back at least in 2004. We had a complete UN plan suggested. Even back in 2017, we even had maybe an even better plan ahead of us, but it didn't work out. So I think that it's not going to be like magic. It's not going to be that we put our signatures on a plan, both leaders, and we go through the referendums, and then everything will just start working and we will be living happily ever after. I don't think that peace is built and is constructed like this. Therefore, I think that scenario number 4, maybe I will agree with Mr. Clerides that currently seems like a Netflix scientific rom-com movie. But I think that maybe the work that you have did is exactly important in that aspect. I do not believe in magic solutions. I am a politician. I know it takes a lot of sacrifices, a lot of pain, a lot of political cost, and a lot of committed people and champions of peace in order to build something. Maybe we don't have too many currently in Cyprus. But maybe the international community and its representatives that are here today, and all of us, including the political actors who do believe in a new era in Cyprus, we can push forward for an intermediary framework agreed between the two leaders to have a more participatory process, to have a more inclusive process for the Cyprus issue. I really believe that we need this. I really believe we need this for the sake of transparency, for the sake of democracy, for the sake of participation of the syndicates, of the chambers, of the students, of the educators, of everyone who wants to bring forward a suggestion. And I'm not saying that the Cyprus, at its whole, it's going to be like a huge negotiation table. This is not what I'm saying. But maybe from Ireland, which definitely is not perfect, okay, and they're still trying to cope with the Good Friday Agreement. At least they stopped the bloodshed. But maybe we can have a different process based on 3 tiers of diplomacy. We can have the tier concerning the international dimension and the security dimension, where also the EU, Turkey, Greece, and the UN will take place in that table of negotiation. We can discuss between the leaders and our negotiation group about the internal politics and dimensions and the constitution of the country, but then we also need, at the 3rd tier, the civil society to discuss, to bring suggestions forward, to discuss and to solve the daily issues concerning the lives of the people that they will be living on this island the following day. Sorry, you know, politicians always take a bit more than usually. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xenia. And I notice the passion with which you speak that I hear in all of your voices. This clearly speaks to the heart and not just the mind. Canan, can I invite you, because you bring a different perspective. You work in education and curriculum development and instruction of teachers. So how do you, through that lens, what is your sense of the plausibility of these scenarios?
Actually, I have been working in the higher education, one of the higher education institutions in the north, and we are experiencing a lot of problems, actually, challenges in terms of tertiary education as well. But before that, I need to make it clear that with no way, my way, and their way scenarios, we have had, and we are still having, and we will be having, divided narratives and historical misinformation, actually, in the curricula. Because education systems in both North and South are like things have changed a little, but not as sufficiently enough, I believe. For example, Cypriots, young Cypriots grow up learning biased or incomplete versions of the war, and this deepens mistrust and it fosters separation. So with this in mind, in 2016, we as a group, sponsored by the Minister of Education, in our university, we renewed all the basic curricula. And while doing this, we did our best to use peace language and remove concepts and historical aspects that might foster hatred between the two communities. And we tried to focus on cultural aspects which highlight Cyprus' identity in the north. But of course, it is still the teachers putting this into implementation. So again, it depends on the teachers' beliefs, their ideas, their philosophies, and to their conscience, how much, to what extent can they be liable to the curricula that have been developed. So we might still have divided narratives and historical misinformation. And we do have brain drain and disengagement actually right now, because most of the young people, especially on the north side, go abroad for education and for earning their lives because the economical situations are not appropriate for them. And I would like to focus on some important challenges in tertiary education that we are facing right now in the north. For example, we have out-of-date teacher education programs that fall behind in competing with the global teacher training programs. And teacher training processes are not compatible with the needs of the digital age. So with no way, my way, and even with their way, some of the things might be updated, but not really. So right now we have lack of or undeveloped higher education inspection bodies in the north side. For example, we have YODAC, like Higher Education Planning, Evaluation, Accreditation, and Coordination Council, but it has been so insufficient in planning, evaluating, coordinating, and we have so many problems in terms of higher education right now, which do affect the economical and social status of the community in the north. We have lack of standardization in student admissions to universities. And all these are forming a big threat on the quality of higher education. And actually, because of this lack of control in student admissions, there are so many people coming. On the surface, they come as students, but they end up doing something else. And because of the wars and because of the mobility of economical crisis in the world, there are so many people moving into the north, and this makes classrooms a multicultural setting for most of us. And right now we have so many problems dealing with this multicultural identities in the classrooms, which is a very big problem for the basic teachers and for the secondary school teachers, actually. So while dealing with what we can do to solve the conflicts we are having with the South, we are also dealing with some other important problems in the North, dealing with a big group of population, and they're actually going to be a big threat for the profile, and actually the curricula which is implemented are not suitable for those people as well. So there are so many problems we are facing on the other side, which all makes this stagnation and inaction go on. And I don't believe that my way and their way scenario will be solutions for this. And what I believe is our way scenario, which might change certain things, which might update the education system in the North, and which might bring up different opportunities for both of the communities to share and to improve, actually, on the other side of the island.
Canan, thank you, and thanks for bringing this really important issue to the table. I really appreciate your perspective and your sharing, and we'll come back to that. Andromachi, you have the honor of closing this first round of reflections on the plausibility of the scenarios.
Thank you very much. Just before commenting, I would just like to say something about Huri, because at some point she said, I don't know who I am. Well, I know who you are, and you are one of the people who has worked so much about reunification. You came to Unite Cyprus now. You have spent so many hours of your life trying to work for a solution for this country, and I don't think anyone can take that away from you or you being a part of this. From then on, I am happy to be part of a discussion on the Cyprus futures for a number of reasons. First of all, because I don't think we have ever discussed the Cyprus problem as part of our future. It has never been discussed as something that actually influences our future. We don't see it as such. And we could be discussing for hours how maybe the Turkish Cypriot community considers the Cyprus problem through the lens of, okay, what is done, let's proceed. But for sure, the Greek Cypriot community has remained kind of more hostage to the trauma of invasion. And we have remained kind of more hostage to looking at the past. And if I can make a kind of criticism for the peace and reunification movement as well, to which I belong as well, is that for many years the concept of a Cyprus problem solution was discussed through a very romanticized understanding of the past. Let's go back to the good old times where things used to be good, etc. Most of the times this is even distorted because for the Greek Cypriots it lacks the experience of the Turkish Cypriots in the 60s, but also because maybe it wasn't even true at times. But what we have failed to do is look to the future. What we have failed to do is we have failed to discuss the future as the best case scenario for the country. What is going to be the best case scenario for our future? Not to make up for the mistakes of the past, not to go back to something that existed in our minds in the past, but how do we shape the way forward for our future? And in this setting, I would question how we fail to perceive that the Cyprus problem keeps changing dimensions. It was a different Cyprus problem in the 60s. It was a different Cyprus problem after the 1974 invasion. It was a different Cyprus problem after our accession to the European Union. And especially in the Greek Cypriot community, when we have kind of spent all our lives calling this bizonal, bicommunal federation a painful compromise, how are we supposed to look to the future and really envision our future on the basis of a federation and actually have a positive understanding about this or a positive feeling towards this? And why have we never managed to redefine the concept of a federation through the prism of our accession to the European Union and what that brought to it? Because if it had been a painful compromise for the Greek Cypriots in the 70s when it was agreed, after our accession to the European Union, it has become a sustainable solution. Where is this discussion? It is nowhere. And when we discuss the futures, the other thing that I appreciate a lot is that it brings back the agency to the people as well. It makes us part of this, because in so many years, the Cyprus problem is being discussed in a kind of, it's the Cyprus problem normally discussed by two men behind closed doors. The people don't have any knowledge of what is happening. I have many hats. You mentioned some of them. I think what is kind of a constant in the past 10 years of my life is that I'm working for change in the country and for peace and reunification in the country. In these years, I have seen I have seen what peace can do and what work for peace can do. I have seen what cooperation can do. And I have seen the wonders. And the fact that we are in a position in this setting and in the complete absence of political will to push for a positive narrative when it comes to us living together, the fact that we can still have such events, or the fact that all of us involved in the peace and unification movement see how this is starting to spread, is because of all the activities and actions of a few individuals who do it on their own time. Had this been taken up as a political cause for us to shape the way forward, had this been turned into the basis of what our educational system would be promoting, had this been kind of turned into a national endeavor about how we shape our future and how we proceed to something else. And how do we get away from all of this? I'm very sorry to say that from all the scenarios, the one in which we are now is the no-way scenario. Not because there is stagnation or a frozen conflict or a status quo. These things do not exist. But because there is stagnation when it comes to our understanding of our role in this, and when it comes to our understanding in influencing developments. And as Xenia said, when we look at what is happening around us, when we look at Palestine, the complete obliteration of humanitarian international law, when we have UN resolutions there that speak for something else, but actually on the ground we see something else happening, how can we feel kind of assured and laid back in our notion of we want a solution based on the UN resolutions and UN Security Council resolutions? We need to reposition ourselves as agents in this discussion. We need to reposition ourselves as agents in shaping the future. I am very happy because in all the futures mentioned, you see all the dilemmas and all the problems that the lack of a solution bring with it, like environmental concerns, the corruption in which both communities are being sliding into. We are constantly kind of walking blindly towards the fait accompli of time because we have kind of sat back and thought that this peace is none of our business. No, there's never going to be a solution that will come on a day and appear in front of us. A solution and peace is something that we need to start working on from today or from yesterday or since like 50 years back. And unless we perceive this and unless we perceive even the discussion of a settlement as simply the step that will allow us to proceed all together, but with challenges as well, because it's not going to be rosy, even if a settlement is being accepted, then we cannot be part of this. So I would take out of the futures that cooperation is what should be leading the way forward rather than an approach of conflict. And that's the message that we should all get out of this. Thank you.
Andromachi, wow. Thank you. I really, really appreciate your contributions and your reflections. And just to pick up on a few, the notion that the status quo is not stagnant and not static, but continues to evolve. And by the sounds of it, it only continues to evolve for the worse. Conditions deteriorate. The other thing that I'm struck by is how your contributions echo something, an observation of Cypriots that develop these scenarios, and that the Cyprus problem is almost a bit of a black hole. It sucks up all energy and all thinking, in that there's no consideration of the climate. And in fact, climate didn't come up, migration came up a little bit, education and propaganda came up, but there's so many issues that are mattering to Cypriots that in fact almost get sucked into the vortex in the black hole of the Cyprus problem. So I hear from many of you, I hear some questions around the plausibility of resilient peace. I hear a strong plea for agency and action. So, and I hear kind of a broad sense that the first three scenarios have been something that either you're stuck in or that have been tried and doesn't really get you very far. So I'd be interested to hear from you. Given this situation, what are important levers for influencing the future? Because it sounds like if people do not take action, then this continues. So what do you see as the levers for change? Leaders? Who wants to? Christos?
You know, I've been listening to this conversation, and somehow, and in other events also similar to this, I get the feeling that we don't live in a real world. I wonder if Erdogan was here and was listening to all this, what he would have to say. We have to understand, for Turkey, Cyprus, the whole of Cyprus, is of crucial strategic importance. It is in the Eastern Mediterranean, very near Turkey. Turkey has formulated a specific policy for Cyprus and is not going to give it up merely because there is some wishful talk from citizens of Cyprus, whether Greek origin or Turkish origin. Unless, I have to repeat this, Turkey changes its culture and policy on Cyprus and the Aegean, because it is interrelated, there will never be a solution to the Cyprus problem. Even if 1,000 years pass, the Greeks will never accept, the Greek Cypriots will never accept the occupation of Cyprus. They will never accept it. And I'm really sad when I hear north, south, this side, that side. There is no north and south, there is no this side and that side. It's an artificial relationship, it's an artificial situation which has been created by a Turkish invasion occupying Cyprus, 40% of the island, with all the consequences that we know. Unless we realize this, all Cypriots, Turkish and Greek, that it is in their best interest that they be let alone to manage their own future the way they want, and the way they want to decide, we will never submit to any pressure to find any solution. So I just get the feeling that this education things, the environment and so on, this they will come to the forefront once we solve the problem. I'm afraid now we will not
Christos.
solve the problem by going to these details.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Meral, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yes, I hear Christos. The problem is what you call artificial does exist. You know, you may not accept it, but it exists. So I don't know if you have crossed the checkpoint, but there is a life going on in the north, and because whatever happened in 1974, I also call it occupation. Equally, I believe that Cyprus Republic is occupied for the seats of the Turkish Cypriots. I do not, so unless we go into our way and face it for all of us. Turkish Cypriots are not in the Cyprus Republic, their seats are occupied by the Greek Cypriots. There is Kyrenia municipality once you cross the checkpoint, whereas I know where Kyrenia municipality is, it exists, I pay my council tax at the Kyrenia municipality in the north. So you not accepting something politically does not change its reality, right? And this is the stagnation in Norway and my way scenario. And because of that stagnation, when something comes in their way, because we are stuck in the Norway and my way scenarios, we don't accept their way. That's why what you see as the Netflix movie is something that at least we should try for. We should try to be the agents. I want to give one example from Turkish Cypriot community. Teachers union, primary teachers union, trade union have always been very progressive. They are still very progressive people. They are pro-solution. They also call that there is occupation in the north, right? These people, I am born in 1983, just a month after the establishment of TRNC. What happened between 1974 and 1983? We had the Cyprus Turkish Federated State. Why was it that Cyprus Turkish Federation State did not have any UN resolutions condemning it? What was happening? Did we have isolation when we didn't have TRNC? No, we didn't have isolation. Why all of a sudden we established TRNC and then we have all these UN resolutions against us? We are not recognized. We have to prove that we exist. We have to prove that we are here. We have to prove that life goes on. Why? Why? Because the then leader Denktash, in his Machiavellist approach, that his way was the only way and he was the most trusted person to take care of the Cyprus problem, because he could not be re-elected, he had to come up with a new state. And because he was a true believer in the division and having two different states in Cyprus, he manipulated the whole society, he manipulated Turkey. Turkey never wanted to come in the way that you think, at least it is my opinion. So we had this leader who could manipulate his society, who could manipulate the politicians in Turkey, make sure he has his way, and is the establishment of TRNC. And what did the Teachers Association do in their the Progressive Teachers Association? They agreed with the establishment of the TRNC. They agreed with it. When I read about it, I am shocked that they agreed with it. Why? Because they thought that because we were kicked out of the Cyprus Republic, Greeks would have the Cyprus Republic and they would happily let us have the TRNC as a separate republic. They were so naive. And now these are the same people fighting for federal Cyprus. So it's exhausted. No way, my way, their way scenarios are exhausted. What is stopping us? What is wrong in trying to put our effort in our way scenario?
Yes. Andromachi, you indicated you...
Yes, discussing the real world, sometimes I wonder how
how one could be dreaming. Is one dreaming when they want to acquire agency about a problem that impacts every single aspect of their lives? Or is one dreaming when they think that a Turkey or an Erdogan who has been painted as this monster, who he might as well be, who has absolute control of the north, he has 40,000 troops in the north, he's there, the Turkish Cypriots are becoming increasingly asphyxiated. Their will is being obliterated in the Turkish Cypriot community. And we sit back and we are like, okay, this man and this country that has its plan about Cyprus, we are safe. We are safe in this setting. We are safe with this country being a guarantor in our republic. Is this dreaming or is this reality? What is this? And I'm wondering, how can we be discussing the future of Cyprus when we set the Cypriots aside? And I'm going to give an example about how history and how when some politicians think of a way of things turn otherwise. In the 60s, when the TMT, along with our own nationalists, they were kind of in this common understanding of putting the two communities aside, and we had the Turkish Cypriots living in the enclaves, and that the TMT, they basically had complete control of the enclaves. And what was their plan back then? Their plan was that we put the Turkish Cypriots there, we tell them about the Greek Cypriots and how they are killing all their families, etc. And in this way, everyone who's going to come out of here, they will be wanting partition, and they will want Taksim. But what did it happen? The enclaves, in the end, if one reads the history of the Turkish Cypriot community, turned out to be the seeds of opposition in the Turkish Cypriot community. It was in the enclaves that the people who then protested in 2003 and overthrew Denktash in the streets, it was in the enclaves that their minds were formulated. It was in the enclaves that they perceived that this division will get them nowhere. It was in the enclaves that this thought started being cultivating. What I'm trying to say is that history and the reading of history can never set the agency of people aside. And we cannot be discussing our future while we set our agency aside. And at the same time, I am questioning everyone who says that we live in a different world because we are asking and we are working for peace. In what way are we going to be more safe? In a framework of an agreed solution, or in a framework in which we have the international community behind this, or in a framework in which international law is obliterated and Erdogan, in the pretext of his guarantor powers in the country, can do whatever he wants in the spark of a single gunshot in the country. Thank you.
And once more, the past takes precedence over the future. Once more, the past is the focus of conversation. And this was something the Cypriots that were involved in this process experienced as well. So, Huri and Xenia, can I ask, focusing about the future, what is your biggest concern for the future? And what is your biggest hope for the future? If you could ask a clairvoyant to look at 2035, what are the things you would like to ask about the Cyprus of 2035?
This is a very good question, actually. What I hope for 2035 is, especially I'm looking at this from media perspective. I hope that we will have a media which frames the truths as it is, as it was experienced in people's life in the past. And I hope that, because media plays a very significant role, especially in deepening the division, solidify biases and stereotypes, and as much as stick on and strengthen the insulting discourse towards each other, unfortunately, and perceiving out-group as a threat. So what I hope in the future, and also it's influenced the intercommunal relationships negatively in terms of lack of lack of cooperation between us and negative feelings towards each other. What I expect and I hope, and we have a lack of media literacy. That's why, we are living in a digital era, everyone is playing as a non-professional journalist's role, while we are sharing our opinion or even like any post, or even we are commenting under a post. Therefore, it shows us that unfortunately in the both sides we have a lack of media literacy. And I hope that in the future we will have professional and non-professional journalists, media users, influencers, who have the perspective of peace journalism principles, which okay, I'm going to finish. Which contribute to this process from highlighting cooperation perspective, promoting reconciliation perspective, and being the voice of all minorities and their problems and also their suffers in their daily lives. I hope I answered the question.
That's a very clear vision. And a question about what will be the role of the media and how will the media act in the Cyprus of 2035. Xenia, what are your questions for the Cyprus of 2035? What would you like to ask the clairvoyant?
I'm thinking about many things right now. But I just to say something from my point of view, being involved in politics for many years, I believe that politics in Cyprus, we use them mainly to explain the world, where I believe that politics has to do more about planning the future. And I think this is the art that we are not really cultivating here in Cyprus a lot. I know that the history is, there is this multi-perspectivity in Cyprus, and everybody has their own milestones and historic roots and paths. But I believe that what we are missing is rather a more dialectic approach concerning each other. And especially the world that we are currently living, I think that it's more living the moment in rather the wrong way. Living the moment meaning reading something on Facebook, on Twitter, on watching something on Instagram, and then we automatically forget about it. The news, they happen for the day, the following day we don't even remember what happened yesterday. The news of last week, they seem as if it happened a year before, and so on. I get the impression that if we really want to act politically, and when I say to act politically, I don't mean to become a politician and to sit on a TV panel or to engage into a political discussion, but rather to decide about what we want for the future. Because the scenarios that we do not want, we should take actions today in order to avoid them for the future. So if we all agree on this in this room, that we certainly do not want to see scenario number 1 taking place in 2035, or scenario number 2 taking place in 2035, then we have to act today. It's not that we will decide on everything. Mr. Clerides, I understand what he's saying. He's absolutely right. We cannot influence what Turkey will think, what the future leaders will think, what Greece will think, what the world is going to be around. But we can certainly make some kind of change, each one of us, from the capacities, the abilities that we have. And I do not see this happening currently. I see lots of discussions that they are not really fruitful for the future. And since you're asking me about the future, well, I would really like to see now some initiatives taking place for some common projects, some great common projects, like a bicommunal, bilingual school in the buffer zone, giving an international baccalaureate degree to the kids from both communities, where it's going to be a really high caliber school where kids can attend and create a new model. I really want to see today the mayors of Nicosia, both Mr. Brunzos and Mr. Harmanji, collaborating actually so that I will be able to walk across Ermou and to be on the other side just like this, no checkpoints, no controls, no. I really want to see a common and joint photovoltaic park taking place in Bila, providing cheap energy, electricity especially, to a group of villagers living around that area so that they know that we built this together. So yes, there are things that we can do, and in this way we are working and we are walking towards the scenario that we want to see, and we can do them, we can talk about it, we can advocate about them, we can be very loud about it. So we do not have to solve everything, we do not have to agree on everything, we can agree that we disagree on many things, as Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, but also among us. It's okay. Let's see what we can do to reach where we want to go.
Brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant, I'm saying in terms of highlighting that differences of opinion may not just exist between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, but also within the communities. Neither community, and let's not forget about the religious minorities, are not monolithic entities. Canan, what are your questions about education in 2035 or anything else?
Actually, I don't want to be that much pessimistic about future. To start with, like past is over. We are not living in the past, and we are living in present, and future is ahead of us. And we need to move thinking this in mind, and no matter who interferes with this Cyprus problem, it's us living here, and it is us, the two communities, facing these problems. So I do believe that we need to change, we need to be agents for change, and we need to do our best. I agree with my friend. We need to do our best, and I believe that education is the best agent for that. Things do not happen overnight in education. Things take place gradually. So we need to keep having bi-communal activities. We need to keep coming up and do some projects. We need to keep coming up in panels like this, and we need to look with hope for the future, because economy is the giant problem that will make us change. We need to change. We need to be flexible. We need to be adaptable. Otherwise, both of the communities will be stagnated and will be in action. So we shouldn't be focusing on the past anymore. We should be focusing on the future. That's all I can say. And there are so many details, but this is not the place to go on into those details. But we need to believe in it first. If you want it to come over, we should believe in it.
Christos, where do you see Cyprus in 2035?
How many Turkish Cypriots are now in Cyprus? You need to answer this question in honesty. I have in mind the Kuku report, which indicates that the overwhelming majority is not Turkish Cypriot in the occupied part of Cyprus. Statistics tell me that before the invasion, Turkish Cypriots were around 17–18% of the total population of Cyprus. Now they may be 10 or 5. So when we're talking about a community problem, I think we don't see the real problem. It's not a community problem anymore. It's a problem of occupation, invasion, and the very way that the international community condemned Russia for the invasion of Ukraine and Crimea should do the same for Cyprus. We cannot have double standards worldwide. So when I hear talk about the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots taking action to convince their leaders, Turkey, Erdogan is the leader. He has the key to the Cyprus problem. Let's face it,
So,
this is the reality.
Christos?
So I don't think that it's a question of some Turkish Cypriots that have been left in Cyprus trying to overthrow the Turkish regime in Ankara. This is not going to happen. The Cyprus problem will be solved in 2035, because you asked me about that, only if Turkey changes its culture and policy on Cyprus. That's all. Very simple. That's
Okay.
my point of view.
Thank you for sharing that, and I think that that's a view that needs to be talked about as well and heard, so I appreciate you sharing it with us here. Who haven't I asked about their vision for 2035? Meral? Or shall I first go to Andromachi? Your vision for Cyprus of 2035? Then you have a bit more
I
time?
don't work with visions, I work with action. And I mean, being a person that has been working so much for peace in the country, but at the same time being a political analyst, and a cynic political analyst for whoever is following my podcast, my actions and where I spend most of my time in my life completely contradict my analysis about where the Cyprus problem is heading. But this is not, this comes out of a profound understanding and belief in the capacity for things to change. In the profound understanding and belief in the fact that I have seen in Cyprus what cooperation can do. Everything. The occupation is there and it's a very bleak reality for us. But it's even more bleak for the people who live in both sides of the divide, for people who feel the whole of Cyprus as their own, even today and even under occupation, and for people who spread their wings all across Cyprus, trying, in fact, to work against the fait accompli of division, to work against the fait accompli of invasion and of occupation. And for all of us here, or for all of us who believe in this, I think it can never finish. And this work has its basis on cooperation. In Cyprus, every positive thing we've seen since 1974 has been an outcome of cooperation and not an outcome of division, of conflict, or of putting the knife in the wound. It's time we heal our wounds. We healed our wounds. It's time we appreciate that Cyprus is a traumatized nation. All of us, Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, people who live on this island, we are traumatized. The more time passes, sadly, new realities are being enforced on the ground. The demographics of the country are changing. The problem in itself is changing. What we shouldn't lose focus on, however, is the need to work on cooperation, regardless of what the state of affairs is, because that's the only way we can at least safeguard some relevant absence of war in the country, because this is what we are talking about in the current setting. Thank you.
Meral, your ideas about 2035?
If I keep in the positive way, and that is, if we manage to be active now, we manage to have more resilient kids in their questioning of the Cyprus problem, we have some media support and we work towards our way, then we will be resolving the division and Cyprus will benefit economically and socially. If we are stuck with the idea that it's only within the Turkish hands and the occupier Turkey to want to solve this, and I believe it did twice, once in the Annan Plan and in Crans-Montana, and the Greek Cypriot regime backed away. So it's a very comfortable zone to say Turkey must come forward to solve it. Turkey did come forward at least twice to solve it, and the Greek Cypriot regime was not there because you want it all or nothing. So if it's all or nothing, by the time we are in 2035, you are saying maybe there are only 5% of the Turkish Cypriots, you will have none. So those settlers that you resent will be more, they will be your next door neighbors. If you don't take action now, your kids and your grandkids will not have Turkish Cypriot neighbors, and you will have, your whole life will have responsibility in this. So for my life, I take responsibility in working for our way, not pushing the onus to a powerful state and victimizing myself, waiting for the powerful state to take action. I resent to that, as hopefully we can convince people like you who believe that we have to sit and wait for the imperialists to want what we want and then we can agree with them. That is a dream. I think that is more like a Netflix scenario in my world, and I hope we can come up and own our own scenario and have a better future in 2035. Otherwise, Turkish Cypriot society will be long gone from the island in 2035. You will be happy with your invader next door.
And it will only be a matter of time for the Greek Cypriot community.
I'd actually like to find out, there are some people here who worked on these scenarios, who were part of these conversations. So Ipek, I know that you're at the back. Petros, who else is here? Is there anything that you are noticing in these, Hussein, Berna, anything, any observations you want to share listening to this conversation in your own work on working with the future that you want to leave as a food for thought? Petros. And please speak up loud so that others can hear you.
I'd like to thank the panel for coming. Thank you for the time here. I think what we're hearing is multiple perspectives which hold their truth. Because yes, we gained our independence in the 60s. The Turkish Cypriots went through a very tough time from the 63 onwards. They became second-class citizens. Many Greek Cypriots, we don't have to think about it. We had a war in 74. Lots of Greek Cypriots were displaced. We're still carrying the traumas of that war. All these are truths. But we cannot go back in time. There's no time to. We can wait the future to bring worse things to us. And what we should do, we should try and solve things practically. Even things that are seemingly impossible might not be that difficult. So the issue with Turkey wanting to control Cyprus. From what my very simple understanding is that Turkey does not want Cyprus to be a threat by having Greek bases or anything like that. I'm sure that a middle way can be found where an independent Cyprus can coexist without that being an issue. And it's up to us to raise that issue and actively engage. Because all these things can happen, but they can only happen if we take matters and our fate in our own hands. So rather than seeing things as competing ideas, I think we should align them and try and find ways that can, because at the end, all Cypriots need to be happy with move like that, and that's actually our goal.
Thank you very much, Petros. And just for your information, Petros is an eye surgeon. In other words, not the usual suspect talking about these matters. Thank you very much. Berna, you want to... do you want to...
Maybe he can help with short-sighted visions.
Berna, can we hear from you?
Very briefly, actually. So, I mean, today, listening to all the participants, it was very, it was very reflective, and what it reminded me is actually 2 years ago, in June, in Austria, we had a group of 36 Cypriots, and it was a very intense 3-4 days. We had all the perspectives heard, like we are hearing also today. But what it reminded me today is that back then, what we were hoping to get is, let's start discussing and moving into action. Today, what I'm seeing after 2 years is that we're still discussing, but we have not taken any action to move forward. Cyprus needs a future, and Cyprus needs a future that can be created by Cypriots. This is very romantic, but this is something that we all need to work on. I'm afraid, I'm a mother of 2. I'm very upset continuing to live in Cyprus because I don't see any hope for Cypriots on the island, and that's not the case for only Turkish Cypriots. We may think that today it's only Turkish Cypriots the island, but we know that there's a reality on the other side of the divide as well. It's the Greek Cypriot youth also who are living the island. So we all have to remind ourselves that we have the responsibility. You're at the age of 70, you said. I'm 52 today, and I know that in 10 years' time, there will be a new generation in Cyprus who will still be thinking about the same thing, but we'll all be gone. So that's not what Cyprus deserves, and I think we all have to be thinking about that.
Thank you. I get a sign from the Cyprus Forum that we need to wrap up, and I think we can conclude that this conversation isn't over. And you have seen the little leaflets on your chairs. And I think it says on the top big, let's talk about Cyprus. And let's talk about Cyprus not in the way that we're used to. Let's talk about Cyprus and the futures that it may have ahead of it. These may be 4 possible futures, there may be other futures. But the only way in which we can move into the future is by actually engaging with what the future can bring and what we can do to change it. The situation isn't static, it's constantly evolving. So let's talk about Cyprus and the future Cyprus wants to create for itself. I would like to thank my speakers, or our speakers, for their reflections and their candor and their passion. And I would like to thank all of you for coming and engaging. You can find more information about the scenarios, and you can find more information about how to engage with the scenarios on the website www.cyprusfutures.org. I suddenly feel like a television presenter, as has been referred to here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.